Hello, everybody. My name is Benjamin Day,
And I am Jillian Mason.
and this is Medicare for All, the podcast for everybody who needs healthcare. Well,
Yeah,
Jillian, if there is one thing that everyone is talking about these days,
hmm
it is JD Vance's affinity for couches.
that's right. Yep, absolutely.
And I mean affinity. Yeah. But if there are two things that everyone is talking about, it's Vance's couches and Project 2025. So you may be wondering, what is this mysterious project and what does it have to do with me? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. Project 2025 is kind of the right wing map to a terrifying future. And if its proponents have their way, the future of healthcare is especially grim and terrifying. So today we're going to kind of deep dive into what this thing is and how it could change healthcare as we know it if there is, worst case scenario, Trump presidency or Republican controlled Congress.
Yeah.
So,
Wait,
one,
before we begin, I
yes.
just have to say, for the people who are watching on video, I just have to say I have this giant Band-Aid on my face, and it's just because I had a biopsy to see if my face is made out of cancer now. And
Go ahead.
so I just wanted to point that out
Mhm.
and say I will be back to my normal, beautiful appearance very soon. I also, we had our latest episode got a little buzz online, and someone pointed out that we were sick people. And he was like, I'll take my health advice from healthy people. Thank you. So I would just like to point out that we don't actually give health advice. We give healthcare policy advice, and you should only take healthcare policy advice from sick people. So
Exactly.
yes, only take healthcare policy advice from people with giant band-aids on their faces,
Right.
people on a lot of prescriptions, etc.
Yeah. In addition to health insurance advice, I'd say you should take only from sick people because a lot of times people are like, oh, yeah, this health care plan is great until you need health care. And then everything falls apart and you end up with medical debt and you can't get the things you need. So a sick person could have told you the real dope about any health insurance plan. So
It's all true.
right.
Sorry, I just had to interject.
No, that's good.
To make it more about me.
Yeah. And we're not just sick, we're sick.
We're sick.
Yeah, dude, that's so sick. Okay, so one other important thing aside from Jillian's cancer face that everyone should know about this episode, Jillian has read Project 2025 and I have not. I have at best read online summaries and all these things. So this is mostly going to be me asking Jillian questions about what the hell is in there and reacting with shock. So left side of your screen, reaction video, right side of your screen, facts and information. So Jillian, let's just start off with the basics. Like what is Project 2025? Where did it come from?
Oh boy. Well, so it comes from the Heritage Foundation, who I know are some of your favorite people, right?
They gave us the individual mandate. If you
They did give us the individual mandate.
They won't own up to it anymore, but which they now oppose. Yes.
Well, for those of you who have not been fighting the Heritage Foundation your entire activist career, so this is a think tank. It was founded in 1973 because conservatives thought that Richard Nixon was like too liberal. So they were like, oh, let's distance ourselves from that guy and make things more conservative. So they hit their stride though in the first Reagan administration, right? They were like really psyched. They provided his policy playbook, right, which they called the Mandate for Leadership. And Reagan was gung ho about it, right? He implemented or initiated about 60% of the 2,000 or so policy changes that they recommended. And he was like, yeah, great, let's do it. So this Mandate for Leadership thing, they were like, this really worked well with Reagan, so let's do it now every presidential cycle.
And that was really the beginning of the end, the Reagan administration for America.
Yeah, in so many ways. In so many ways. But, they were thrilled with the outcome. The Heritage Foundation was. And so they were like, yeah, let's do this every presidential cycle. And so now that's what they do. And, it's basically like, if a Republican wins this election, here's what they should do. And it turns out that this little Mandate for Leadership becomes very it is actually pretty influential whenever a Republican wins. So,
especially if it's Trump, who doesn't really know anything about anything. So,
right.
of a list is really helpful,
I should say too that one interesting thing about Project 2025 right now is that, like Ben, Trump says he hasn't read it. And I believe him, because apparently he doesn't read anything have longer than 10 pages. So basically, Trump has tried to distance himself from Project 2025. A lot of insiders in his campaign now say that he's afraid this is going to tank his presidential campaign, because it's so full of wild fascist recommendations that are actually many of which are quite unpopular with people. And so that is a contrast, though, to JD Vance, who still embraces many of the ideas in Project 2025. He actually just wrote the foreword to Kevin Roberts' book, Kevin Roberts being the guy who is in charge of the 2025 team. And so he's just going all gung-ho. So for the purpose of our episode that we're doing right now, you are the Trump to my JD Vance.
Right. When he's not on his couch, he's on his Project 2025 booklet.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is just a bunch of crazy fascist nonsense. And I know I use the word fascist all the time. And, people might be like, oh, aren't you, being fast and loose with that? But I'm talking basic dictionary definition fascist, right? So I actually went to Merriam-Webster.
Wow.
So, okay. This is what fascism is, according to Merriam-Webster, which is, in my mind, the most unbiased source. A political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. Those are
spoken
all
like a true Antifa activist, right?
Yes, that's right. When did it become so radical to be against fascists? My grandpa was,
Yeah. I've noticed that they've started pronouncing Antifa more and more unintelligibly, so you can't tell that it means anti-fascism. So it's like Antifa. We are opposed to Antifa activists. Yeah.
I honestly I don't know that most of them know that it's an acronym. I don't know. I don't know. But so I just want to kind of stress that these people are old school fascists. This is literally what this Project 2025 is arguing for.
Okay, so maybe we should dig into this. What is actually in there?
Are you sure? Are you sure you want to dig in?
Where healthcare? I want to know. I think there's a chance that Trump will take quite a bit of this out of the playbook if he's elected. So let's brace ourselves.
All right, let's do it. So let me give you some broad context here, right? Okay. So this is a lengthy text. So even though I have read most of it, I have actually not read the whole thing. Would you like to take a guess, Ben, at how long it is?
I don't know. Let's see. How long would a verbal oration on Fox News take?
922 pages is the PDF I downloaded. Shit. 922 pages. It's very, very, very long and very detailed. And it's going through so much, right? You might, when you read it, you have this sense that oh, this is that scenario with 100 monkeys chained to 100 typewriters typing, and eventually they type something that you kind of think that. But it was actually written by hundreds of Trump cronies tied to typewriters. So even though Trump distances himself from this whole thing, the people of the hundreds of people who actually composed Project 2025, a hefty percentage of them were actually former Trump colleagues, former Trump appointees, Trump friends, et cetera, et cetera. So it's still worth talking about. So we've got this 922-page document. And if you're like me and you're interested in true crime and horror, but you don't necessarily want to read the whole thing, there is an audiobook That they're
What?
slowly
I was
creating.
joking.
No, 10 hours long so far, and they have only recorded 250 pages, which
Oh my
is
God.
amazing.
That'll be a popular listen, I'm sure.
I think I might be the only person who's listening to it.
They need the Cliff
But
Notes.
I put it on when I'm in the pool, just relax and let the fascism wash over me. So the basic premise of this document is, and I know you're going to think this is an exaggeration, but I promise you, literally all of this is on the first page. All right. The liberals in Washington are in cahoots with the Chinese communists and the quote totalitarian cult known today as the Great Awakening.
Is it known today by that because they just named it that?
Yeah. I haven't heard a lot of the kids walking around being like, "Oh, this Great Awakening is really threatening my sense of individuality." No. So it's the Chinese communists, the Great Awoke, and liberals in Washington, and they are putting the very moral foundations of our society in peril. So that's scary.
All right, that sounds like a good start.
Yeah. So the whole thing is about trying to undo that, right? And so they sort of divide this into some main goals. They also have some main goals for the health care section, but we'll get there in a second. These are the overall goals. We're going to restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. We're going to dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. Freedom.
Does protecting our children mean giving them health care?
No. It literally says that it means protecting them from drag queens and their children's libraries.
That seems more important to me too.
Right. Yeah. I know. I spent a lot of time around drag queens in my younger days, and they never denied me healthcare. I just want to throw that out there. They never hurt me. So we're gonna restore the family, protect children from drag queens. We're gonna dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people, because freedom. We are going to defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats, because that's what conservatives always want.
And international threats are always going after our bounties. We know that.
It's true. Mostly China.
Yeah.
They're really hyped up about China in this. It's really interesting. There are a few themes that run through it, things that they're like clearly like really have a bug up their ass about, and China is one of them. So defending our nation from China. And then we also want to secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound great, doesn't it? We all love freedom and children and booty and bounty and the whatnot, right?
And I think the fusion of church and state was also in the Constitution, right?
That's right. Well, this is a Christian nation, so yes, obviously. Oh man. So those are the broad outlines. And then everything else just sort of falls into these like successive chapters that like just go in detail for like every area of public life that they want to take over and fuck up, So it's like Department of Homeland Security, intelligence services, media agencies, Department of Education, blah, 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 blah. And one of them, of course, is the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yes, I see. All right. Yeah. So do we want to get to the healthcare piece, or is there anything else?
No,
big picture
I'm sorry. I way too much of this. Sorry. But I do want to go through a few, like kind of like just like highlights from the other portions just to give people a little flavor.
I am still worried about my bounty. So
yeah, you're right.
Tell me how it's going to be saved, please.
I'm going to save your bounty. So I'll say that one of the weirdest and most insidious things about this is that, and that people I think have to actually understand this, is that their whole thing is that personnel is policy. So like HR basically is a big focus of this. And
very compelling.
I know, right?
Would go
And I'm
well on the
like,
campaign trail.
what kind of an alarmist am I? Like that I'm going around being like, the thing you most have to be afraid of is HR. But still, let me tell you, the thing you most have to be afraid of is HR. So what they're going to do is they're going to reclassify most federal employees as appointees, right? Which totally sounds boring and like technical, right? But it's actually super scary because there would be no career civil service people, right? And instead, every new president would bring in their own lackeys who have only loyalty to them and who are, really easy to, coerce into doing exactly what you want, whatever dirty work, right? So that's one of the, I think, more insidious and scary things that could happen.
Right. And just to step back, big picture on that, because this does relate to healthcare and everything else too. Earlier in the country's history, both state government and federal government, I'd say all political departments were like heavily politicized. They didn't have career professionals who just kind of like did their job regardless of which party was in power, and trying to do kind of a neutral professional job. And especially politicians would kind of use the ability to hand out jobs to get votes. This is like the old party machines, right? It was like, hey, we'll fill this whole agency with people who voted for me and supported me in their communities. But then obviously they have no idea what they're doing. Once they get there, they're not qualified, and they're just going to do whatever they're told to do, even if it's the wrong thing to do based on the expertise they don't have. So I do think that this is their whole attack on the deep state, right? The deep state is basically career professionals who know what the fuck they're doing.
Right.
And they don't like that because they're asking them to do nonsensical, irrational things that hurt people. And that are not within the mandate of the agencies themselves. So that's pretty scary. That is kind of like, let's take ourselves back to early 20th century where every department is politicized. There's no like neutral professionals out there.
Yep. Scary as fuck. And then the rest, I thought that one was particularly interesting. A lot of this is just stuff that like you've heard before from conservative politicians, right-wing assholes all over the place, right? So like again, they've got to bug up their ass about China. We're going to get aggressive with China, missile defense in East Asia, militarize the border some more. Take away visas. Right now, our country provides visas for immigrants who have been victims of human trafficking. They're going to take those away.
I hate those people.
Yeah, I know, right? Because the victims of human trafficking are the ones who are really, really messing things up.
Yeah. Jillian, the human traffickers don't bring us their good people. Just like Mexico.
Jesus Christ. Oh. So, speaking of that, there will be mass arrests and deportations of undocumented immigrants. They want to defund PBS. Finally, they actually said
PBS.
Finally.
Wow.
And then they make this really funny argument about how it would actually be better for PBS that way because competition in the free market would improve PBS. Which is fun. All right. Oh, they want to reinstate work requirements for WIC and SNAP. So those are federal food assistance programs. They want to make sure that we don't give federal student loans to undocumented students or to any students at schools that give aid to undocumented students. So that is a whole thing. Get rid of protections for trans folk in Title IX and instead give legal protection for teachers who refuse to refer to students by a name or pronoun that doesn't match the gender on their birth certificate.
Oh, God. Because every teacher has access to birth certificates. We know that.
Yeah, because I've been worried. I've been worried about those people who take a brave stand and fucking refuse to accept reality and dead name kids and stuff. I want them to
and courage. Yeah.
Let's see. Eliminate the Department of Education, roll back environmental regulations, roll back the regulations on the production of baby formula because that's too safe, I guess. Roll back labor regulations, except for this one thing, which I am calling the Chick-fil-A rule. But basically, that would say that all workers would get time and a half on Sundays, which is pretty great. Except that it's encouraged to it's meant to discourage employers from making workers work on the Sabbath.
Oh, I see. Okay, now it's all coming together. Yeah, because every faith celebrates on Sunday. We know.
Right. And then finally, build a time machine, return to the 18th century, and stop democracy from forming. That is kind of the summary, right? Basically, like, let's get rid of all the different protections that constitutional place in order to keep a democracy healthy. So that's the overview. Again, I read too much of it to not say some of those things.
You can kind of, this is why presidential campaigns, they issue briefs and issue statements that are very short. They're a little light on details. They're a little bit more like, here's my values, here's what I'm running on it. And this is why they do not do this shit. They don't list out every tiny little thing, because it is, it's like, oh, that's what you're actually going to do? Fuck.
Yeah. I'm just looking at a comment that we have coming in on Facebook from Pat watching us live. Someone called Project 2025 the MAGA Sharda. I can't get it out of that.
Oh my God.
Oh, I am with you, Pat. Oh man. So that's like basically what the whole thing is about, is about going back in time and redoing it in a more inequitable way. It's cool, right?
Make America great again, like the 18th century.
Right.
All right, can we get to the healthcare bits, please?
Yes.
Please.
Fine. Let's talk about healthcare. Like the rest of the document, they have some overall goals. Would you like to hear about the overall goals that they have for healthcare?
Oh, do I? Yeah.
Oh, yes. I knew you would. All right. So, number 1, protecting life, conscience, and bodily integrity.
I actually like all 3 of those things.
I know. What would that mean to you, Ben? If we were to create a healthcare system that protected life, conscience, and bodily integrity?
Well, reproductive health is clearly a bodily integrity issue, I would say. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I'd say personal conscience, but I feel like they might think like your employer's conscience may matter more than yours. This is going to be my guess.
Well, it depends on whether your conscience is Christian or not.
Right. And
no spoilers.
And universal access to healthcare, that is very basic to protecting life. It's kind of the most basic. So,
well, Ben, I don't want to spoil your fun, but I'm afraid that that's not what they're talking about.
I'm shocked.
Instead, they're freaking out about gender and sex. And so basically, they are saying that radical actors inside and outside government are promoting harmful identity politics that replace biological sex with subjective notions of gender identity and base a person's worth on his or her race, sex, or other identities.
I feel like these people are not watching the Olympics right now. I mean, if you were paying any attention to anything, you would know that biological sex is not really a clear-cut thing.
Means nothing. Nothing. So in their mind, this is really about protecting children from anyone basically who might tell them that they're okay the way they feel inside. And so, and then also the conscience piece, I was like, oh, that's great. Cause like you, right? Like my conscience says, why don't we give everyone health care? Or like, no one deserves to die because they're poor. But the conscience stuff they're talking about here is about controversial research. So research that bothers the consciences of Christians, like stem cells, and really whatever else seems scary to them at the time, right? So they said this thing about the NIH that I thought was really funny. Despite its popular image as a benign science agency, the NIH was responsible for paying for research in aborted baby body parts, human animal chimera experience, and gain of function viral research that may have been responsible for COVID-19.
What are the citations on that one, Jade? Are there citations anywhere in this document?
There are some footnotes. You know what? If I were reading slightly more carefully, I would have looked at those footnotes. But I was amazed. I just sat there flabbergasted by this particular statement. So, So basically, stop the NIH before they COVID again.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's the conscience and protecting life bit, right? Which,
Right.
again, very little to do with conscience or life.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so their second goal is empowering patient choices and provider autonomy.
All right, now we're getting into the healthcare bits. Let's go.
Yeah,
All right.
that's what you'd think. So basically, you pointed out this thing that they say at the very beginning here. You pointed out just how smart you thought it was, so I'll read it to our audience. They say basic economics holds that costs tend to decrease and quality and options tend to increase when there is robust and free competition in the provision of goods and services.
This is hilarious to me because it's totally true that basic economics would tell you that, but once you get to advanced economics, you realize that that doesn't hold. I mean, if you have a small community that can not possibly have more than one hospital in it to serve the size of your community, where the hell are you going to get provider competition? That's not going to happen. That's going to be a monopoly market. And the same thing with the welfare economics tells you that basically basic economics don't work in any area of healthcare or health insurance. That's why welfare economics was invented in the 1970s. But maybe they're taking their economics back to the era that they also want to establish public policy for. So
yes.
Unlearning decades of economics research and findings.
This is McKinley-nomics at its best.
Right. And ironically, competition in healthcare actually drives up costs because we end up, that's the whole thing about single payer, right? It's like, if you have all these insurance companies competing with each other, then they're paying for marketing costs, they're paying high executive salaries, they're imposing all these costs on providers who then have to do a different set of paperwork for each insurance plan. So that's all due to competition, right? That's having a market that drives up our prices. And it's the reason we have double the cost of any other country that has universal health care. So this is why you need more than basic economics.
So recommendation for the Heritage Institute, attend Economics 102.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, not surprisingly, most of their talk about empowering patient choices and autonomy for providers is really about unleashing innovation by decreasing regulatory compliance. So,
and I forgot to add, the other reason markets don't work in health insurance is because we are idiots about our own health. Unfortunately, I wish it were otherwise.
Tell it, Ben.
we do not make informed decisions about our own health in the same way that we might about like buying a dishwasher, for example, or a fan or even a car, because you really have to be kind of an expert in healthcare to know what is needed, and we have to trust experts, the doctors, to kind of tell us what to do with our health. And so you can't just like diagnose yourself and then shop where the best place to go is and to know where the best person to see you is. We don't know shit about our own health.
Maybe you can't, but I have an app for it. No.
Yeah. This is why doctors are not supposed to treat themselves, in fact. And so even if you are qualified, and even beyond that, people cannot choose the best health insurance plan for them. This has been shown over and over again with like the Medicare Part D plans when you have to buy a private drug plan for Medicare. People almost always pick a plan that is not the cheapest for them over the long term, just because it's way too complicated. You need to be like an actuary to figure it out. So yeah, markets just do not work anywhere in healthcare, basically. But.
Yeah, it's interesting. This whole document has. I'd like to talk to someone about the Heritage Institute about what their feeling overall is on markets, because like you would think it would be very positive, but they also they tout the healthcare marketplace, blah blah blah. But at the same time, well, they have some other thoughts too. Well, we'll get to this in a second.
Okay.
But as you may guess, empowering patient choices is really just about giving people the choice to have alternatives to like traditional Medicare, right? Through like Medicare Advantage and stuff like that.
Choice to create profits for companies.
Precisely.
Right.
Precisely. The blessings of liberty, Ben.
All right. Tell me more about it. I want to hear more about Medicare, especially. So.
Well, in with Medicare, yeah. So they basically just want to they want to make like all these different private alternatives more accessible. They want to do a lot more auditing on Medicare and Medicaid to expose fraud. Because
Mhm.
they really latch on to the commonly held misperception that fraud is really the biggest problem in these
It's not
in
a
these
terrible point.
situations.
And in fact, most estimates of single payer healthcare show like a big chunk of the savings you get from moving to Medicare for all is actually from reduced fraud. And that's because public agencies have stronger legal rights to investigate fraud. They can actually like
Yeah, yeah,
demand
yeah.
documents. You can have the power of law behind you to require that providers give you more. And private insurers really struggle to identify and prosecute fraud on their own. So this is why it's like the opposite of good idea for reducing fraud is switching more people into Medicare Advantage plans, because private insurance companies do not have the same power to identify, investigate, and prosecute fraud. So
Well, that's very interesting. I guess I always thought it was kind of a fallacy that like individual people trying to defraud the Medicare and Medicaid
oh
systems
yeah,
were like a serious source of.
no, it's not individual people, it's providers. Provider
Mhm,
fraud is very common. So
mhm, mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Yeah. Well, they want to focus on individual
Oh,
people.
I see. All right. Well, like fuck that.
So yeah, and then for Medicaid, they're just interested in again exposing fraud and also cutting payments. They don't give a whole lot of very specific recommendations for Medicare. I mean, a lot of this healthcare stuff is very, very vague,
Mhm.
but it's all kind of premised on these like ideas of this basic idea that like uh, poor people and people of color are basically being victimized by over dependency on the state.
Hmm. Mhm.
So basically, all of these different programs, Medicare, Medicaid, all the way down to WIC and food stamps and all that stuff, right?
Mhm.
That they're actually victimizing poor communities
Mhm.
by forcing them to depend on the state. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. No. And there's like a grain of truth of that in Medicaid,
What?
in that once you, it's not dependency obviously, but once you get onto Medicaid, it creates this very difficult situation where you can't earn much more without losing your health insurance. So you might have a job prospect that you could earn a lot more and it would be better for you and your family, your household, or whatever. And but you would lose health insurance, and this employer does not provide health insurance on their own, or maybe there's like a 6-month gap before they give you health insurance. So it does trap people into like self-impoverishment almost.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a bad thing, but it's not dependency. It's like you're being fucking trapped. So
Yeah. 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 Yes. Yes. It's not dependency. It is entrapment.
it's not like I
Um,
need you. It's like I need to get away from you. But yeah,
yeah, absolutely,
right.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. This notion that they have that this is like kind of like corrupting people by giving them the idea that oh, someone else should be responsible for their future except them. It's like that kind of fundamental bootstraps bullshit.
Mhm.
You
Do they
know.
have work requirements in there for Medicaid?
Oh, why? Certainly they do.
Of course. One state has tried this, imposing work requirements on Medicaid. Um,
Oh.
Arkansas did it in
Mm.
2018, I think, and it lasted for 9 months before they were like, "This is fucked. It's not working." Everyone lost their coverage, and they abandoned it in less than a year. So that was a great Republican experiment with Medicaid work requirements. Let's do it.
Fantastic.
Let's do more of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And not only that, but like work requirements on basically every single social service. Like
Right.
at this point, you're gonna have to like prove that you have a job in order to like use the library or like get a firefighter to come to your house. I don't even know.
Right.
So yeah. So that's their thoughts about autonomy and patient choice. Those
Right.
are
So they want
mostly
you to be dependent on your employer, but not on the state.
yes. Exactly. That's the way that's the natural order of
That makes
things.
sense.
It says so in the Bible. Um, Speaking of things that
Mhm.
it says in the
Mhm.
Bible, one of their most significant goals, because they spend so much fucking time talking about it throughout the course of this goddamn document, their third goal is promoting stable and flourishing married families.
Okay, carry on.
Oh, you sound like you're fine with that. Okay, great. So let me tell you what they mean. So basically, I'm just going to read this quote.
Okay.
Okay, so they're really concerned with the problem of fatherlessness, right? Because they say that
Uh-huh.
families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well ordered nation and a
Maybe
healthy
they should put fewer
society.
fathers into jail. It's
Yeah,
just
no
one thought.
shit. Well, they okay, yeah, well, okay, all right. So they want them to repeal all of these different policies that they say subsidize single motherhood,
Hmm.
disincentivize work, and penalize marriage. And the
Hmm.
reason is that working fathers, and this is a quote, are
Hmm.
essential to the well-being and development of their children.
Hmm.
But the United States is experiencing a crisis of fatherlessness that's ruining our children's futures. In the overwhelming number of cases, fathers insulate children from physical and sexual abuse, financial difficulty or poverty, incarceration, teen pregnancy, poor educational outcomes, high school failure, and a host of behavioral and psychological problems. By
Oh my God.
contrast,
That's the dumbest fucking paragraph I've ever read. I can't even let you finish it. I
I
mean,
know, it's wild, right?
oh,
So there's that. So fathers insulate children from abuse. I just know so many people who have had the shit beaten out of them by their dads, and I just wonder how they would feel about that.
right. And sexual abuse, I would say, probably overwhelmingly due to fathers, not mothers,
Just
within
saying.
families, and they also seem to be getting slightly wrong the division of labor that happens within families, where within traditional, male female
Quote unquote.
couple
Yeah.
families. Where women end up basically doing almost all the parenting work and family tasks, which are
Yeah.
generally the things that help your kids.
Just saying.
So it's
Yeah,
sort of like a male. It's like a men's rights section here. It's
it
like
is,
a.
but specifically married fathers, because,
Mhm,
and shall quote again,
mhm.
by contrast, homes with non-related quote unquote boyfriends present are among the most dangerous places for a child to be.
Wow.
Health and Human Services should prioritize married father engagement in its messaging, health, and welfare policies.
I can't wait to see the citation on that one.
It's funny. One of their specific recommendations is like basically a PR campaign for married fathers.
Oh God.
I don't know what that
Mm.
looks like. Like if it's like, famous married fathers like going up and being like, when I was a boyfriend, I was a danger to my children. But
No.
now that I'm married, protecting people's educational outcomes or whatever. Yeah,
This gets really Orwellian really fast, doesn't it? Like,
it does. It does.
yeah.
It does. The other piece of that
And
that's
that's like
like
the
in
Handmaid's Tale shit. I mean,
yeah. Oh, and and the kind of corollary to that is it's just like stopping abortions, right? Which are
sure.
obviously a major threat to, because you can't
Some
have
things.
fatherlessness unless you have no, you can't have I don't know. Anyway, the point is that abortion is a real threat.
Mm.
And so they elaborate some of the weirdest and craziest ways to stop abortions. They're talking about, like banning abortion pills through the old Comstock
Mm.
Act, which is from like the 19th century. They're talking about banning travel funds for abortions. They're talking about it's just several different doing audits of Hyde Amendment compliancy,
Mhm.
which is basically the Hyde Amendment is the law that says that no federal money can pay for abortions, and they really want to make sure that no federal money is going to abortions. But guess what? It isn't
Right.
because
That's
the
already a
Hyde
law, fortunately.
Hey,
I mean, wouldn't abortion really be the best policy if you don't like single parents?
I mean, I don't know, Ben. What do I know? I'm just a childless cat lady.
With no couch.
Oh man, they like honestly, like the percentage of the health and human services recommendations that are related to abortions are and abortions and stopping gender affirming care.
Right.
It's just wild, right? Like in their minds, that is really what healthcare is all about.
Right. Well, if you think about the last 2 to 3 years, that's kind of been what the right wing is focused on exclusively at the state level, right? It's been attacking gender affirming care, transgender care, and reproductive health care.
That's right.
So
now for me, things like those things might be included in my bodily integrity, but it's not. It's not how the Heritage Foundation sees things.
Oh no! See, you bodily autonomy you're not allowed to have, but bodily integrity you can keep all your body together.
As long as it's some man's integrity on
my right.
Yeah, okay, I get it now. Okay, so that's the culture wars, right? And then let's see, what else did they have to say? Oh, so their fourth big goal for healthcare is preparing for the next health emergency. And this is where the petty side starts to come back. They are so fucking pissed off about the way the pandemic went down, and they are dying. Literally, they're probably going to die because of these policies. They are dying to make sure that when the next pandemic comes, we do absolutely nothing.
Right. But it's not going to come because under their watch, NIH is not going to create the next pandemic.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Boom. Yeah. So they claim that quote, another quote. I love these quotes. Sorry, I just can't stop. Basic human rights, medical choice, and the doctor-patient relationship were trampled without scientific justification and for extended periods of time during the pandemic. Excess deaths not due to COVID-19 skyrocketed because of forced lockdowns, isolation, vaccine-related mass firings, and colossal disruptions in the economy and daily rhythms.
Oh, yeah. Those excess deaths were clearly not due to COVID.
Did you have a comment on that?
All of the other things. Wow. This is pretty extreme, far out there conspiracy theory shit, you know.
They're like very petty about it.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, my picture of the Heritage Foundation from past years is not that they're this extreme. That they are that, at least in the past, that they are not like off the deep end, like batshit crazy, but it feels like maybe Trump world has dragged them into a new dangerous place.
Yeah. And in fact, they are going into a lot of damage control right now. And Kevin Roberts, the gentleman I mentioned before, who announced that he was the head of this project and then was quickly forced to step down. Yeah, he had to step aside because the Heritage Foundation is like, oh shit, this is like a step too far, even for our base. Yeah. So also just again, like, about that next health emergency, the next pandemic. They spend a lot of time saying that masks are dumb and were an infringement of our freedom. Still maintaining that masks have no scientific justification for use. Okay.
And they got so much out of those school wars. I think they basically built a right-wing grassroots network around school masking fights. So they know the points they have to touch upon. It's
wild, yeah. And then of course they want to take away Dr. Fauci's broad, unchecked power, which is funny because I just remember him through most of the pandemic, like basically pleading with people, you know, like please stop doing stupid things that will spread this virus or whatever. But they saw him as having a lot of broad and unchecked power. So,
right.
I don't know.
I mean, the pandemic started under Trump, correct? And then, and all the laws that were passed during that period were bipartisan, is my memory.
So the pandemic was spread during the Trump administration, but when did the NIH create the pandemic? That's
Oh,
the
right.
question.
That okay.
That was under the first Obama administration. Very few people know that.
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, and then finally, right, their final goal for healthcare, and this one is actually kind of interesting to me. So it's instituting greater transparency, accountability, and oversight, which are things that, Ben, you and I talk about all the time. We are so for transparency, accountability, and oversight.
I'm really with the titles in this, all the sections, really.
Yeah. The titles make it sound terrific.
Yeah.
Well, the subtitle of this chapter is "Fuck Big Pharma," because they are so upset about Big Pharma's role in the pandemic. I think that they're just like big mad that Big Pharma made so much money off of the vaccines or something like that, because they're very explicit about Big Pharma being a problem. So they want to stop private corporations from, quote, capturing federal agencies by putting their money into public-private partnerships. So, and again, Ben, we have definitely decried public-private partnerships many times. We said that's a terrible idea. They agree with us. They say no private money should be going into health and human services. I think maybe they think that the federal government only promoted vaccines because Big Pharma told them to.
Okay.
As opposed to because like vaccines, science.
Did they think vaccines were bad?
I'm pretty sure they think vaccines are bad.
Wow. All right.
In general, again, when it comes to like health emergencies, doing things about it tends to infringe on our freedom. So doing nothing seems to be a better option.
But I will say there has been kind of an anti-pharma undertone on the right for a while now. It's rarely directed in the right direction. I think another piece of this is they don't want Medicare to negotiate drug prices, which would seem like the most basic anti-pharma thing you can do, and which they've started to do under the Inflation Reduction Act. So they want to roll that back, which seems like a giveaway to Big Pharma to me.
So it's true, right? That's absolutely true. And I don't understand really quite how they reconcile that with some of the more like, not radical, but progressive kind of recommendations they're making. So they basically say we should shut and lock the revolving door between government and Big Pharma. Regulators should have a long cooling off period on their contracts. 15 years would not be too long, right? That prevents them from working for companies that they have regulated. Similarly, pharmaceutical company executives should be restricted from moving from the industry into positions with regulatory agencies. I mean, I'm a communist and I agree with that. I think that's great.
You're actually a Chinese communist, I believe.
I am, apparently. I'm more communist than most Chinese politicians. So, and then another thing they said, specifically the FDA should prohibit pharmaceutical companies from purposely sitting on their legally available right to be the first to sell generic versions of their drugs. Which is, again, a big problem in the pharmaceutical industry that they have actually correctly identified, which is that, pharma companies hold on to their intellectual property for so long so that, other companies can't sell the generic versions of their drugs, which is something that obviously brings down costs, right?
Yeah, so lots of other things, sneaky things they do to prevent generic competition too.
Exactly. And so this is a kind of bizarrely like kind of I don't know, kind of strange bipolar response here, right? Where they clearly have some beef with Big Pharma. And I think, again, that it's because they're pissed about how the pandemic made them a lot of money. But at the same time, they also, let's stop government negotiations over prescription drugs.
Okay. Well, you've done the impossible. You found an area of overlap between us and Project 2025. But I guess as you've been going through this whole thing, my question has been, I kind of feel like, or I have felt ever since the attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act failed, that Republicans really have not had a health plan. They usually, if you get presidential debates, they don't, in primaries, which we didn't this year,
Mm-hmm.
they don't talk about healthcare at all. A lot of Republican candidates don't even have like a health section on their pages, unless it's just like word salad, like
there is no Trump
values.
care. Yeah.
Right. They don't, you could not distill from that, well, what's your vision for the healthcare system if it were run the way you wanted it to? Because I noticed you had a lot of stuff in there about Medicaid, about Medicare, going after that, going after the NIH, HHS. But obviously, the vast majority of Americans have healthcare through their workplace, employer-sponsored private health insurance. I haven't heard a single word about that in this whole plan. So, do you think that this adds up to like a Republican health plan, or is it just like hitting on all the talking points for like the culture wars and then really still not a health plan?
The second one. Yeah.
The second one.
It's just a bunch of nonsense about the Great Awakening. It's just a bunch of collection of conservative talking points from like the past 20 years, basically, right? Some of them even older than that, but yeah. And it does not project, in general, Project 2025 does not project a kind of positive vision for the future. And by that, I mean, they do not project a vision of what they actually want to see in the future, right? They project a lot of, they talk a lot about what they don't want to see, right? And what they want to roll back, right? What do we want to take back? What do we want to stop? And not where do we want to go,
Yeah, and I have to say I think it's a huge political miscalculation. I mean, I think every public opinion poll shows that healthcare costs are like kind of the number one thing that piss people off. I mean, obviously access to, which is kind of very closely related to cost, but you can't have like a healthcare platform that does not have any reduction of healthcare costs. And they don't seem to talk about costs in this whole project, which is kind of stunning to me. It's like a real weak point for a platform. But
Project 2020, apparently by 2025, none of us are going to have problems paying for it. Okay. That's no longer going to be a concern, so that we can just really focus on stopping
hand waving. Right.
right. Pearl clutching and the whatnot. I think that it's really, I think that you're right, that there's no sense of where Republicans want to go. And I think that's because if they were to say out loud where they want to go, which is that they just want most of us to die in the streets, Right.
They don't care if people are uninsured or if costs are too high.
Right.
So the vision is really privatize everything, privatize all the public plans. They're all privatized already, but they want to more privatize them. I thought it was funny. They want to make Medicare Advantage plans like the default that you enroll in. But then they also claim that choice is a big thing, but you just can't choose the public one. You get auto enrolled in the private one. So they have deregulating everything. That usually means like letting you buy shittier health insurance plans, getting rid of all those kind of minimum standards for what healthcare coverage has to cover. And then they must have Medicaid block granting in there too, right? I mean, that's been like the one platform that's lasted in the Republican Party for decades now, but which would also be catastrophic. It's super technical. It means that instead of like Medicaid will pay states basically how many eligible Medicaid recipients you have and how much care they use. Medicaid pays about half of it, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the state. But block granting would mean we're giving you one fixed amount for your whole state. And if you end up having more than expected enrollees, or if they have more than expected health needs, then you run out of money. And it's up to the states. They have to deal with it. And you're fucked if you don't get enough. And usually the block granting is coupled with like, we're going to give states less and less and less over time. That is just horrific shit that would be just catastrophic. So
catastrophic or better for everyone?
You be the judge.
You be the judge. I don't know. I will say, in terms of like kind of overall takeaways, I think you're right that the biggest one is that there's no there. But I think one of them though is this big pharma thing, right? Like,
Right.
I'm really interested in that. Like, is there a way, right, that maybe big pharma is becoming toxic, not just on the left, but on the right as well? And
I
does
think
that
so.
mean,
Yeah.
can we team up with them and go after big pharma together?
My guess is that this is a fake promise. You remember the last time Trump ran, he ran on negotiating Medicare drug prices in
Yeah.
2016. And then he met with a bunch of rich pharma CEOs and changed his mind, which is that's kind of the trend with Trump. He has like a populist position. He meets with the CEOs and he's like, oh, I changed my mind. So I don't think we're actually going to see them going after big pharma, but I agree with you with the take that big pharma is becoming publicly toxic kind of across the political spectrum, which is due to a lot of our group's hard work, Medicare for All movement and allied health justice organizations, and just like the reality of how shitty big pharma is.
Yeah, they
it's
kind of tell
ironic.
on themselves a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's ironic that the vaccine moment didn't save them from everyone hating big pharma. We thought it might. But yeah, that is a good trend. And I think it just really opens the door for more attacks on our pharmaceutical companies and pricing in the coming years. So yeah.
Now, if we can only do the same thing with big insurance and big hospitals and big medical device providers and everybody else.
That's basically what the Medicare for All movement is. It's the movement against big insurance, right?
That is right. That is right.
Yes.
So long story short, we're really going to need to make sure that Project 2025 stays in the science fiction section
genre. Yes. Agreed. Yeah. And it is worth doing some like contingency planning for like, if the worst happens in the election cycle, what are we going to need to quickly fight on? And of course, you never want to do just purely defensive fights. You want to go on offense at the same time you're going on defense. So yeah. All right. Should we wrap this puppy up? Should I thank our podcast team here?
I don't know. I could talk about Project 2025 for a whole other hour, but I'll spare our audience.
Next episode will be Project 2026. The year 2 of the administration.
Yeah, good shit.
All right.
Excellent.
So I do want to thank the podcast team. Our podcast manager is Angelique Davis. Our show notes writer is Jerry Katz. And our audio editor was Craig Stanton. Thanks to all the 3 of you. Do not forget to like this episode. Subscribe to the Medicare for All podcast on whatever platform you use. And this podcast is a program of the Healthcare Now Education Fund. So if you'd like to support our work and support the podcast, you can donate at our website, healthcare-now.org.
Stay dangerous, y'all. Oh, stay safe and stay dangerous.